The galaxy of Arvin was wide, full of light, but also full of silence. Messages of trade, calls for alliances, and warnings of war often echoed through the void between the stars. Yet among those countless signals, one message rose above the rest. It was not a declaration of power. It was not a threat of conquest. It was a plea for help, spoken with a voice full of sorrow and dignity. The Queen of Silora had sent it. Silora was a green world once filled with music, gardens, and towers of crystal. But now its skies were dark with smoke, its rivers ran thin, and its cities stood half-broken. The Dreven Dominion, a powerful empire from beyond the Rim, had pressed its hand upon Silora. They had demanded tribute, control, and surrender. When the Queen refused, the Dominion struck, burning farmlands and cutting off the people from the stars. And so the Queen had sent her plea. She spoke with calm but heavy words. She told the galaxy that her world could not stand much longer. She told them that Silora was not asking for treasure or territory, only for a chance to survive. Her voice carried across trade routes, through listening stations, and into the halls of great fleets. But the galaxy turned away. The Arvin Council dismissed it as hopeless. The great merchant guilds saw no profit in saving a world that could give nothing back. Other kingdoms, afraid of the Dominion's wrath, silenced their diplomats. The Queen's message drifted on, unanswered, like a song lost in the wind. Yet there was one who listened. Far from the great cities of power, on a quiet outpost at the edge of human space, a soldier named Marin heard the broadcast. He sat alone in a small room filled with tired equipment and flickering lights. The outpost had little importance, guarding a sector where no battles had been fought in years. Most of his comrades had been reassigned long ago. Only a handful of soldiers remained, keeping watch over empty skies. Marin was one of them. He was not young anymore, but he was not old either. His face bore the lines of someone who had seen too many battles. His armor, resting on a rack beside him, was scratched and dented from wars long past. His ship, a modest patrol vessel, was reliable but small. He had once served in larger fleets where the roar of engines and the command of admirals guided his every move. Now, he was here, in silence, with only the hum of machinery as his companion. When the Queen's voice came through the static, Marin straightened. Her words were steady, yet beneath them lay pain. He listened to the way her tone trembled when she spoke of her starving people. He heard the weight of loss when she named the cities that had fallen. He felt the courage in her promise that Silora would never surrender its soul, even if its body was broken. Something stirred in him. The other soldiers at the outpost dismissed the message. They shook their heads, saying Silora was too far, too weak, too doomed. One laughed bitterly, saying it was just another world soon to vanish under the Dominion's shadow. They returned to their duties unmoved, but Marin could not forget the sound of that voice. All through the night he replayed it. He walked the narrow halls of the outpost, hearing her words in his mind. He remembered battles where cries for help had gone unheard, and what it had cost when no one answered. He thought of the times his own people had once been overlooked, when the galaxy had doubted the strength of humankind, and he made a choice. Marin stood before the outpost commander the next day. He asked permission to take his ship and travel to Silora. The commander stared at him as if he were mad. "You are one man," the commander said. "The Queen asked for fleets. Do you think you can fight an empire alone?" Marin's reply was simple. "I do not know what I can change, but I cannot sit here and do nothing while her people are calling for help." The commander tried to stop him, warning that leaving without orders would mark him as reckless, even disobedient. Yet Marin felt a fire in his heart that no rule could extinguish. For him, duty was not only about following orders. It was about standing where no one else would. That evening, while the outpost slept, Marin prepared his ship. It was not a grand war cruiser. It carried only light weapons and enough supplies for a single journey. But to him it was enough. Before he left, he stood on the outpost's landing deck and gazed at the stars. Somewhere among them was Silora. Somewhere out there was the Queen whose voice had broken through the indifference of the galaxy. With a steady breath, Marin whispered to himself, "You called, I will come." The engines roared to life. The ship lifted from the deck, rising into the darkness. The outpost grew smaller behind him until it was no more than a shadow. Ahead stretched the great void, cold and endless, but also full of promise. Days passed as Marin traveled through slipstreams and across empty sectors. Alone in the cockpit, he thought about the choice he had made. He did not know if he would reach Salora in time. He did not know if one soldier could matter. But he believed that answering the call itself was worth more than silence. He remembered his training, the faces of comrades lost, and the times when he had been saved by the courage of others. If they had not stood for him, he would not be alive. Perhaps now it was his turn to be that hope for someone else. When at last Salora appeared before him, Marin saw a world scarred by war. From orbit he could see dark clouds covering the land. Fires burned where cities once shone. The blue of its seas was broken by streaks of gray. Even from this distance, the pain of Salora was clear. As he descended, he saw the capital. Its spires were cracked, its walls crumbled, but its banners still waved, holding the crest of the Queen. The landing platforms were empty, for few dared to travel anymore. He brought his ship down slowly, the wind shaking its wings as it touched the ground. The air was heavy with smoke. Buildings leaned like wounded giants. People moved in the streets with slow, weary steps. Children clung to their mothers, and elders sat in silence, staring at the ground. Yet when the people saw the human ship, their eyes widened. They had expected nothing. They had expected no one. From the palace gates came guards dressed in worn armor, their spears dulled but still held with pride. Behind them walked the Queen herself. She was tall and graceful, though her face carried the strain of long nights without rest. She looked at Marin with disbelief. "You are human," she said. "Where is your fleet? Where is your army?" Marin stood straight. His armor, though old, caught the faint light of the broken sky. "I am alone," he said. "But I heard your call, and I came." The Queen studied him, her eyes searching his face. For a moment she seemed ready to turn away, for how could one man save a world? But then she saw something in his gaze. Not pity, not fear. A promise. Her lips trembled as she spoke. "No one else came. Only you." "Sometimes one is enough," Marin replied. The people of Salora gathered around, whispering among themselves. They had expected fleets of shining ships, not a single soldier. Yet in that moment, standing before the Queen with nothing but his will, Marin became more than just a man. He became a symbol. And though Salora was broken, a spark of hope lit in the hearts of its people. The people of Salora had long believed the stars had forgotten them. Their skies once glittered with ships of trade, travelers, and scholars. Now the skies carried only smoke and the shadow of the Dreven dominion. When Marin's small ship landed, it was as if the heavens themselves had answered in the faintest whisper. The Queen of Salora, Alira, had greeted him on the cracked steps of her palace. She had expected fleets, thousands of soldiers, perhaps even allies of old who still remembered her world. Instead, she saw one man, a single human soldier standing in worn armor with weary eyes. She had nearly turned away, but the firmness in his voice when he said, "Sometimes one is enough," left her silent. Marin followed her through the palace gates. The palace had once been a jewel of Salora, its halls lined with crystal glass and tall carved pillars. Now the windows were broken, the walls blackened by fire, and the great banners hung torn and faded. Guards stood along the halls, their armor mismatched, their faces hollow with exhaustion. Yet they still bowed as their queen passed. Marin's boots echoed against the stone floor as he walked behind her. His gaze moved across the scars of the palace. He had seen battlefields before, but this was not just war. This was slow strangulation. A people crushed not by one battle, but by a chain of wounds that would not heal. At the heart of the palace, in a chamber where once hundreds of advisors had spoken, only a few remained. They rose when the Queen entered, their eyes falling with disbelief upon Marin. Whispers spread among them. "Only one soldier," one said. "Not even a ship of war," another muttered. The Queen lifted her hand for silence. She turned to Marin. "Tell us why you came." Marin stood in the center of the chamber, feeling every pair of eyes upon him. "I heard your call," he said. "No one else came. I could not remain silent. I came because your people asked for help." The advisors frowned. One of them, a man named Torin, stepped forward. His robes were patched, but his voice was sharp. "One man cannot fight the Dreven Dominion. Do you think you can turn back their fleets with your single ship?" "I am not here to promise miracles," Marin replied. His voice was steady, calm, but filled with conviction. "I am here to stand beside you. If you fight, I will fight with you. If you endure, I will endure with you. I will not leave you alone." The chamber fell silent. Queen Alira studied him, searching for arrogance or deception. She found none. He was not boasting of impossible victories. He was not demanding tribute or reward. He was offering only himself. And in that simple act, there was something greater than the empty promises she had heard from distant councils. At last, she nodded. Then you will see what remains of Selora. Marin walked with the queen through the streets of the capital. The city stretched out in ruin. Towers of crystal stood broken, some leaning like trees ready to fall. Markets that once sang with trade now lay empty. People moved slowly, their clothes worn, their eyes hollow from hunger. Children watched from doorways, too weak to play. The queen spoke softly as they walked. The Dreven Dominion took our harvests. They burned the outer villages and cut our trade routes. We begged the Council of Worlds for aid. They turned away. The guilds laughed at our poverty, and now we are alone. Not alone, Marin said quietly. The queen glanced at him. You still believe one man can matter? I have seen worlds stand when they should have fallen, Marin answered. Not because they were strong, but because they did not give up. You still have people who breathe, who walk, who can lift their hands. That means you still have strength. They came to the city square. A broken fountain stood at its center, its waters long dry. Around it sat families sharing scraps of food, soldiers polishing rusted weapons, elders telling stories to children. When the people saw the queen, they bowed their heads. When they saw Marin, their eyes widened with curiosity. Who is he? A voice whispered. A soldier, another replied. From where saw they? From the stars. From the humans. Marin felt the weight of their stares. He had not come to be their hero, yet in their eyes he could already see it forming. They had expected no one. Now they had him. A group of soldiers approached, their armor dented, their spears sharpened again and again until the metal was thin. Their leader, a woman named Wren, bowed to the queen and eyed Marin carefully. So this is the one who answered your call, Wren said. This is Marin, the queen replied. He has come to stand with us. Wren crossed her arms. One man against the Dominion? Forgive me, my queen, but this feels like hope built on dust. Marin stepped forward. His voice was calm but firm. You are right. Alone I cannot defeat the Dominion, but I can fight beside you. I can teach you what I know. I can make your blades sharper, your walls stronger, your courage steadier. One soldier cannot win a war, but one soldier can light a fire. Wren studied him for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. If the queen trusts you, then I will listen. The queen placed her hand on Wren's shoulder. Gather those who still have strength. He will train them. Perhaps this is the chance we have been waiting for. That night, Marin sat in the palace courtyard. The stars above were faint, hidden by the haze of smoke. He cleaned his armor with slow, steady hands, remembering battles past. Each scratch told a story. Each scar was a reminder. The queen approached, her steps quiet against the stone. She stood beside him, looking up at the sky. Do you regret coming here? She asked. No, Marin said. You have left your duty, your command. You could be branded a deserter. Perhaps, Marin said. He lifted his gaze to meet hers. But some duties are larger than orders. If no one else will stand with you, then I will. That is enough for me. For the first time in many months, the queen allowed herself a faint smile. You are strange, human. Most who hear of Selora see only a dying world. You see something else? I see a world that still breathes, Marin replied. And while it breathes, it can rise again. The queen looked at him, her eyes softening. Then let us see if your belief is strong enough to carry us through the storm. The next morning, Marin stood in the city square. Dozens of Selorans gathered, men and women, young and old, holding weapons of every kind. Some carried old rifles, others only spears, and many had nothing more than farming tools shaped into blades. Their faces showed fear, but also something else. Curiosity, perhaps even a spark of hope. Marin stood tall before them. His voice carried across the square. I am only one soldier, but I will give you everything I know. Together we will learn to fight as one. You do not need grand ships or endless armies. You need courage, unity, and the will to stand. If you have that, then you are already stronger than you believe. The people listened. For the first time in years, their eyes lifted with something other than despair. The queen watched from the steps of the palace. She saw her people straighten their backs. She saw their hands tighten on their weapons. She saw the faintest light of hope begin to return. For years she had called and no one had answered. Yet here before her stood a single human who had come when all others turned away. And though the Dominion still loomed like a storm on the horizon, For the first time she dared to believe her world was not yet lost. The city square of Solora was quiet at dawn. The broken fountain stood at the center, its dry basin filled with dust and weeds. Around it, men and women gathered with weapons in their hands. Some held rifles so old that the metal shook when fired. Others carried spears made from broken tools. A few had only wooden staffs. Yet all of them had come because of the human soldier who had answered their queen's call. Marin stood at the front. His armor was worn but polished, and his voice was steady as he spoke to the crowd. "You have lived under the shadow of the Dominion for too long," he said. "You have forgotten your own strength. But strength is not only in weapons. It is in unity. It is in trust. Today, we begin to learn again." The queen watched from the steps of the palace. She saw the doubt on her people's faces, but also something new. They listened. They did not walk away. For the first time in many years, they looked not only at her for hope, but at someone else, a stranger who carried the fire of determination in his eyes. Training began that very morning. Marin started with the basics. He lined the volunteers in rows, showing them how to stand, how to hold their weapons steady, how to move as one instead of scattering. Many stumbled at first. Some laughed nervously, unused to discipline. Others grumbled, claiming the Dominion's machines could not be stopped with such drills. But Marin was patient. He corrected stances, lifted drooping arms, and repeated commands until they became rhythm. He showed them how to march in step, how to turn at a signal, how to listen not just with ears but with eyes. "Alone, you are weak," he said, walking among them. "Together you are stronger. The Dominion counts on your fear. If you stand side by side, fear cannot break you." Wren, the captain of the palace guards, watched closely. She had doubted him at first, but as the days passed, she saw change in her people. The farmers who once trembled now moved with firmer steps. The youths who had known only hunger now held their weapons with pride. Even the elders who had once been silent began to speak words of encouragement. The queen saw it too. Each evening she walked among her people, hearing laughter return in small bursts, seeing sparks in eyes that had long been dull. The sight of one human soldier training her people had become a story whispered across the capital. Perhaps Solora was not yet finished. Perhaps the stars had not abandoned them. 1 week into training, the Dominion came. It began with shadows over the fields. Draven scout ships cut across the sky, their engines howling. The people screamed and ran for cover. Soldiers raised their weapons in panic. Marin did not flinch. He shouted orders, his voice strong above the chaos. "Form lines. Shields to the front. Archers behind!" The Solorans moved, clumsy but willing. For the first time, they did not scatter. They remembered the drills. They stood shoulder to shoulder, weapons ready. The Dominion ships landed at the edge of the city, releasing armored troopers with gleaming rifles. Their commander laughed when he saw the defenders. "You think broken farmers can stop us?" he sneered. Marin stepped forward. "They are not broken," he said. "They are learning to rise." The first shots rang out. Soloran shields shook under the force, but they held. Archers returned fire, guided by Marin's signals. The defenders moved as one, advancing slowly instead of fleeing. Panic did not shatter them this time. Marin fought at the front, his rifle blazing. Each step he took inspired those behind him. Where once fear ruled, now courage spread. The battle lasted only an hour, but when the Dominion ships fled back into the skies, the city erupted with shouts of triumph. For the first time in years, Solora had repelled the invaders. That night, the city square was alive with firelight. People gathered to sing old songs, voices trembling but strong. Children laughed. Soldiers who once doubted themselves smiled with pride. The queen stood before her people, her voice carrying across the square. Today, Solora stood not as slaves, not as cowards, but as a people united. And we have this man to thank, Marin of the humans, who chose to stand when all others turned away. The crowd cheered. They lifted their voices, calling Marin's name, though he stood quietly at the edge. He did not seek praise. His eyes were already on the horizon, knowing the Dominion would not forgive this small victory. Later, when the fires burned low, Queen Alira approached him. "You have given my people something I could not, belief in themselves. I thought they were broken. You showed me they were only waiting for a spark." Marin shook his head. "They already had the spark. I only reminded them how to use it." The queen looked at him, her eyes soft in the glow of the flames. Why do you do this, Marin? You could have turned away like all the others. He was silent for a moment, staring at the stars. Then he said, Because I know what it feels like to be forgotten. Long ago, humans were weak compared to others in the galaxy. No one believed in us. But we endured. Someone believed when it mattered. I cannot repay that debt, but I can pass it forward. The Queen's voice softened. Then perhaps Silora will one day tell stories of the human who answered when all others turned away. The following days changed the capital. The people no longer whispered in despair, but in determination. More volunteers joined the training, eager to fight. Children carried water to soldiers. Farmers gave food to the hungry. Broken walls were repaired with fresh stone. Even the songs sung at night grew stronger. But Marin knew this was only the beginning. The Dominion would return, stronger and angrier. One victory had made Silora visible again, and the storm to come would be fierce. Still, he trained them harder. He taught them ambush tactics, how to move quietly through alleys, how to strike and retreat, how to use the land itself as a shield. He showed them how to fight not like an army but like survivors, clever, quick, and united. Every evening the Queen came to watch. She no longer walked with despair but with pride. She saw her people stand taller, their voices louder. She saw hope return where it had once died. And in her heart she knew this was only because one human soldier had chosen to come when all others had turned away. Yet Marin carried a weight he did not show. Alone in the quiet of the palace courtyard at night, he sat by his ship staring at the stars. He knew the Dominion would not stop until Silora was broken or free. And though he had given the people hope, he also knew the price of hope was often blood. He whispered to himself, "If I fall, let it be enough to keep them standing." But when he returned each morning to the square, he carried no trace of that weight. To the people, he was strength. To the soldiers, he was a leader. To the Queen, he was proof that even in the darkest times, the light of one could ignite the hearts of many. Silora had been silent for too long. Now, under the guidance of one human soldier, it had found its voice again. The Dominion would return, and the battles ahead would test them all. But for the first time, Silora did not wait in fear. It waited in readiness. And at the center of it all, Marin stood, a spark in the darkness, preparing to guide them through the storm that was yet to come. The victory in the capital filled Silora with new life. For years the people had known only fear, but now they carried hope in their hearts. They spoke of the battle where farmers stood beside soldiers and drove the Dominion scouts away. They spoke of Queen Alira, who had walked among them with pride. And they spoke most of all of Marin, the lone human soldier who had stood at their side when no one else answered. But Marin knew hope always came at a cost. The Dreven Dominion would not forget this defeat. The scouts who had fled would return with stories of a world that dared to resist, and the Dominion never forgave disobedience. Days passed in tense preparation. Marin continued training the people. He sharpened their movements, drilled them until their arms ached, and taught them how to fight not only with weapons but with discipline. He split them into groups, each with a task: defenders on the walls, archers hidden on rooftops, runners ready to carry messages, healers prepared to tend the wounded. He showed them how to set traps along narrow streets, how to collapse walls to block enemy paths, and how to use fire and smoke as cover. The Silorans were quick learners. Hunger and hardship had made them tough, and now that they had purpose, they became sharper with each day. The Queen walked among the people, speaking words of courage. She praised their efforts, lifted tired hands with her own, and reminded them that their struggle was not only for survival but for the soul of their world. Still, at night she stood with Marin on the palace balcony, her voice low with worry. "They will return," she said, "and they will not send scouts this time. They will send armies." Marin nodded, his gaze fixed on the dark horizon. "That is what they always do. But we will be ready. They think Silora's broken. We will show them otherwise." The storm came sooner than expected. One morning the sky filled with shadows. Dominion warships descended, their hulls black and sharp as blades. The sound of their engines shook the earth. From the city walls people watched in silence, their breath caught in their throats. The largest ship hovered above the fields, and from its hold poured lines of Dreven soldiers. Their armor gleamed silver, their rifles glowing with charged light. At their front marched a commander clad in crimson plates, his helmet shaped like a beast. His voice boomed through amplifiers. "People of Solora, you were warned. Your queen refused our mercy. You dared to resist. Today your world falls." Fear rippled through the crowd. Some trembled, others turned to flee. But then Marin stepped forward, climbing the wall so all could see him. His voice carried strong and clear. "Solora does not bow. You may bring your armies, but you will not break them. Today you face a people who will stand together." The queen raised her hand beside him. "This is our world. We will fight for it." The cheers that rose from the walls were shaky at first, but they grew stronger. The Dominion soldiers below aimed their rifles and the battle began. The first wave struck like thunder. Energy bolts streaked through the air, slamming into shields and walls. Celoran defenders raised barriers, bracing against the storm. Arrows flew from rooftops, striking between armor plates. Farmers with spears charged side by side, shouting as they drove back enemy lines. Marin moved through the chaos, steady as stone. He gave orders, lifted shields for the fallen, and struck down enemies with precise shots from his rifle. He fought not just with strength, but with the calm of experience, reminding the Solorans that fear could not control them if they trusted one another. Ren, the guard captain, led squads through alleys, ambushing Dominion soldiers from behind. Fires lit the streets, casting the battle in fierce shadows. Children carried water to the wounded. Elders sang old war songs to steady trembling hands. For hours, the city held. But the Dominion was relentless. Their war machines rolled forward, tall walkers of steel with cannons that shattered walls. The ground shook beneath their steps. The Solorans wavered as the machines crushed through defenses. Marin ran to meet them. With a squad of volunteers, he led an attack through the narrow streets, drawing the walkers into traps. When the machines advanced, Celoran fighters pulled down hidden ropes and collapsed walls onto them. Others rolled barrels of oil, setting them ablaze. Smoke and fire swallowed the metal beasts, and cheers erupted as one walker crashed to the ground. The victory gave strength, but more walkers followed. The queen, watching from the palace, clenched her fists. "How much longer can we stand?" she whispered. "As long as we must," Marin answered, standing beside her. His armor was scorched, his arm bleeding, but his eyes burned with determination. Night fell, and the battle did not end. The Dominion pressed harder, sending wave after wave. Celora's defenders grew weary, but they did not break. They fought in the streets, on rooftops, in the very shadows of their broken towers. Everywhere Marin went, he lifted them higher, reminding them that they were no longer slaves to fear. At the palace gates, the crimson-armored commander advanced, cutting down defenders with sweeping strikes. His soldiers marched behind him, chanting victory. Marin met him at the gate. Their weapons clashed, sparks flying. The commander was stronger, his armor thicker, but Marin's movements were swift, guided by years of war. They fought across the courtyard, steel against steel, rifle against blade. The queen watched as her people rallied, shouting Marin's name as he drove the commander back. At last, with a final strike, Marin knocked him to the ground. The Dominion soldiers hesitated, their leader fallen. "Solora stands," Marin shouted. The defenders roared in answer. They surged forward, pushing the Dominion back through the streets. By dawn, the fields outside the city were littered with wreckage. Dominion ships lifted into the sky, carrying their dead and wounded. The storm had not claimed Solora. Exhausted but alive, the people gathered in the square. The queen stood before them, her voice breaking with pride. "You fought not as slaves, not as victims, but as Solorans. You have shown the galaxy that we are not broken." The crowd cheered, lifting their weapons into the air. Children laughed, families embraced, and soldiers raised Marin onto their shoulders, shouting his name. But Marin, though he smiled, felt the weight of the truth. The Dominion would not stop. They would return stronger than ever, with fleets enough to crush worlds. This victory was only the beginning. That night, as the fires of celebration burned, Marin stood alone on the palace wall, gazing at the stars. He knew what was coming. He knew the price yet to be paid. Still, he whispered to the night, "If this is the fight I was called to, then I will see it through, no matter the cost." And in the darkness of the galaxy, where so many had turned away, one human soldier stood ready to face the storm again. The city of Solora stood scarred yet proud after the great battle. Smoke still rose from broken walls and rubble filled the streets, but the people walked with heads held high. They had resisted the Dominion and lived. Everywhere Marin went, people greeted him with gratitude. Children ran after him with laughter, calling his name. Soldiers clasped his arms with respect. Farmers bowed their heads as he passed. For them, Marin was not only a warrior, he was proof that they could stand against powers greater than themselves. Queen Alira saw the same truth. She spoke to the people, telling them that Silora had awakened, that no longer would they kneel in silence. Her voice carried through the streets like fire, yet she too knew that this victory was only the first. The Dominion would not forgive. They had tested Silora and been resisted. Their pride had been struck. Soon they would send fleets larger than before, armies enough to burn the land flat. Marin stood with the queen in the council chamber. The stone table was scattered with maps marked in ink. The queen pointed to the stars drawn beyond Silora's orbit. "They will come from here," she said. "We cannot face them alone. Silora is strong, but our strength cannot match their full empire." Marin leaned on the table. His eyes traced the star charts. "You are right, but you are no longer alone. If one human answered your call, others might too. And if the galaxy sees what you have done, perhaps more will rise beside you." The queen frowned. "The other worlds turned away once. Why would they change now?" "Because you showed them it is possible," Marin said simply. "They saw Silora fight. They saw Silora endure. Sometimes all it takes is one spark for fire to spread." The queen was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Then you must be that spark, Marin. Go to the stars. Carry Silora's voice with you." The decision spread quickly. Many were afraid to see Marin leave, but they understood. The city held a great gathering at dawn. People crowded the square to see him off. Some offered gifts of food or cloth. Others simply wished him safe return. Queen Alira stood at the palace steps. "This man came to us when all others turned away. Now he goes forth again, not for himself, but for us all. May his courage reach across the stars." Marin bowed his head. He had no grand speech. He only said, "Silora will never be forgotten. I will carry your fight with me." The people roared their answer, and with that, Marin boarded the small ship prepared for him. The engines flared, and he rose into the skies. Silora shrank below, but the voices of its people echoed in his heart. The journey through the stars was long and silent. Marin thought of the faces he left behind. Farmers who had stood with spears, children who had sung as the battle raged, the queen who had believed in him when no one else would. He carried with him not just memories, but proof of Silora's stand. Recordings of the battle, words of the queen, and messages from the people. All of it was his weapon now, more powerful than any rifle. His first stop was a trading hub orbiting a neutral world. There, leaders of smaller colonies gathered to bargain for survival. When Marin entered their chamber, many turned to him in surprise. A human soldier, scarred and weary, yet walking with purpose. "I come from Silora," Marin told them. "A world the Dominion tried to crush. They failed. Silora stands, and they call others to stand with them." Some laughed bitterly. "No one resists the Dominion for long," one said. "Their fleets cannot be matched." Marin played the recordings. They saw Siloran farmers striking down armored soldiers. They saw walls burning but not falling. They heard Queen Alira's voice crying, "Silora does not bow." The room grew silent. For the first time, leaders who had lived in fear saw proof that resistance was not only possible but real. Some rose to their feet, declaring they would send supplies. Others promised to speak to their people. The spark was catching flame. Marin traveled farther, to a mining colony on the edge of the void, where workers toiled under Dominion contracts, to a desert world where tribes had lived in silence, hiding from patrols, to a city ship that wandered between systems, its people long burdened by tribute. Everywhere he went, he told the story of Silora. Every time he spoke, eyes lit with hope. Some feared to act, but many more whispered that they too were ready to rise. The Dominion felt this shift. Their spies followed Marin. Their ships shadowed his path. Twice he fought off ambushes in the dark of space. Once he barely escaped with his life, his ship battered and burning. Yet he pressed on. He was no longer only a soldier. He had become a messenger, carrying not just Silora's fight, but humanity's name as well. For across the galaxy, people began to say the same words. When all others turned away, one human answered. Back on Silora, Queen Alira faced her own trials. The Dominion had not forgotten. Their fleets gathered again at the edge of the system. Scouts whispered of warships larger than mountains, of armies without number. The Queen prepared her people once more. Farmers rebuilt their walls. Smiths forged new blades and children trained with bows. They knew the storm would come again, but now they were not alone. Messages reached Salora from distant worlds. A mining colony sent ore for weapons. The desert tribes sent riders to fight beside them. Even the city ship promised ships of their own, all of them inspired by Marin's voice. Still, the queen prayed that he would return before the storm broke. At last, Marin came home. His ship descended into the capital square, and the people rushed to meet him. The queen herself stood waiting, her face alight with relief. "You returned," she said. "I told you I would," Marin answered with a tired smile. Behind him came ships bearing allies from across the stars. Not a fleet to rival the Dominion's might, but a beginning. A force bound not by fear, but by hope. The people of Salora cheered. For the first time, they were not alone. The final battle came soon after. The Dominion fleet darkened the skies, a storm of steel and fire. Yet when they descended, they found more than Salora waiting. They found miners, tribesmen, wanderers, and soldiers from distant worlds standing together. Marin fought at the front lines, his voice steady over the comms. The queen led from the palace steps, her banner flying high. The people stood unbroken, their allies beside them. The battle raged for days. Ships burned in the skies, armies clashed on the ground. But the Dominion, used to ruling through fear, found themselves facing something they could not break. Unity. At last, the fleet faltered. Their commanders, seeing the cost, ordered retreat. For the second time, Salora endured. When the smoke cleared, the people gathered once more in the square. The queen stood with Marin beside her. "This victory is not only Salora's," she said. "It belongs to all who chose to rise. Today we proved that no empire is unshakable when people stand together." Marin said nothing at first. He looked at the faces before him. Faces that had once lived in silence, now shining with pride. Then he spoke. "I was only one soldier," he said, "but I answered a call when no one else would. That is all it takes sometimes. One voice to stand so others can follow." Salora stood. "And now the galaxy will stand." The crowd erupted with cheers. Children raised banners. Soldiers lifted their weapons. Families embraced. The name of Salora would travel farther than ever before. And as the stars glimmered above, the story of one human soldier who answered would echo through every corner of the galaxy, a reminder that courage could change the fate of worlds.